Welcome to the apex of sports ownership, the Apex Athletic Collective.
Welcome in everyone to episode 82 of Instigate Success. I am your host, as always, Jake Shaw, aka Jakeymuffins. As we get this figured out, but I am here for episode 82 of Instigate Success, building an ABA franchise, the official podcast of the Hoosier State Instigators. Here every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for the next hour or so. But that's what we got going on tonight. I know last time I think I mentioned we are going to jump into a little bit of a season debrief. We're going to do more of a debrief next episode, actually. We'll be joined by co-owner Frosty, a previous head coach of the Instigators, get his insight on things and kind of go over the season in review in more depth. So that'll be next week's episode on March 21st. But we do plan on doing that, jumping in a little bit more detail, going further into things that went right, things that we think we could improve, and then obviously things we're going to be looking for some input on. But that's a reminder of one of the things that the Apex Athletic Collective as a whole, we really value the fan input. So if you're not already a Patreon member, and shout out and thank you to everyone who is a Patreon member, a reminder that now that we're jumping into the off-season mode, anybody at that fan voter tier or higher, you're going to get access to some exclusive votes throughout the off season where you have a huge input as far as the future of the Hoosier State Instigators, the Apex Athletic Collective in general. So that is coming up here pretty soon, I believe. We're going to have some post season evaluations, players, coaches, and just the team in general. What do you think went well? What do you think we can improve? Obviously, we had the system last year where we had to vote for player evaluation, coach evaluation, what you're looking for as a team in general, like a scheme, and things that you think we can improve upon, as well as things that you think went well, players you want to see back, so on and so forth. It's an exclusive access. You get an opportunity to be a part of that vote for anybody at that fan voter tier or higher. That's the $10 or higher tier, but that will be coming out here shortly. And I'm sure myself as well as Corey, when he's on next week, we'll jump into that a little bit further, give you guys an idea of some of the more specific things you'll have access to and the votes we plan on having here in the off season. But that is definitely one we will be having coming up, player and coach evaluations. And again, that's going to be a huge deciding factor as far as shaping the next season for the Hoosier State Instigators. We took that input from last season when we did that and shaped our roster towards that. We also used the input as far as the coaching side and went out and we got Coach Dobbs this year. So you'll have the opportunity to evaluate our first full-time coach, one that lasted the whole season, and the players as well. Obviously, a little bit more of flux situation this year with the players. So it'll be interesting, I think, in my opinion, to see how that goes as far as the player evaluations, because we did have such a different amount of players on the roster this season compared to last season. Our starting lineup was pretty set for the majority of the season. It pretty much stayed very similar throughout the year. But this season, we had a different starting lineup for most weeks. So, but that is coming up. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing the fans' voices in that. And I always love when we are able to put those fans' vote up. So definitely a huge factor when we go into off-season mode and start looking into things as far as the business side. We'll also cover business side stuff too next week, give you more of an inside look and see where things stand, with the Hoosier State Instigators and the Apex Athletic Collective in general. But again, thank you to everybody who is a Patreon member. We're almost up to 150 now. So thank you for everyone who's joining, whether you're catching it from the Patreon or if you are over on Twitch, catching the stream live over there as well. Um, and also, we'll shout out that we have been, well, this was it Wednesday, past Wednesday, we did do another live stream over on Twitch as well. And I believe we did it on YouTube too. But we plan on doing that weekly now. Myself and Frosty, we're going to be catching ourselves up on some of those games that we missed throughout the season as we wrap up the season for the Hoosier State Instigators. Let me pull up. This was some of the remaining games that we had that we still had yet to broadcast. We just covered that Miners and Instigators game, so that's what we did this past Wednesday. And then every week we're going to be doing another game coming up, and we'll be doing it the same way live over on Twitch and on YouTube. So we'll make announcements as far as what days it's going to be. It's all dependent upon obviously our schedules and what nights we can actually get things to meet up for. Um, but that's just how it goes sometimes, with being a small business and trying to get all these streams out. It's just a little hectic sometimes, and you know uh, other schedules get in the way with that, but we are going to have all the games out, so don't worry. You're not going to miss any of the season 2 action if you did want to catch it live, or I guess the rebroadcast live. You'll have the opportunity to do that. So we just did that Miners game. This upcoming week we will be rebroadcasting that Instigators Kings game, and then the following week we'll have the Aces matchup, and the week after that, we will have the playoff game, and that'll be or the play-in game. That'll be our final broadcast as far as season 2 broadcasts go. So you still got 3 more weeks. That I think is actually going to run us all the way through the ABA playoffs. So yeah, that should actually put us all the way through to the championship weekend. So I think that's actually pretty good timing as long as we can, knock out all those games on schedule. But we will be making announcements as far as which day it will be, and it might vary week to week, but we will make that announcement so that way. We have a heads up, so that way if you want to catch those rebroadcasts live, and then you can comment on them. Let us know every time we mess something up. If you got the one this past week, we definitely had a few mix-ups, and that comes with being a little rusty on these streams. So we pulled up the wrong game originally. We had the wrong team name in the title. Eventually, we got it all squared away. The right game got broadcasted, and at least on the YouTube side, I know we changed the team name. I don't know. We'll have to check on the Twitch side. Um, I don't even know how to, but maybe if we can change that title for that matchup there, get that fixed. If not, then I guess it'll just stay how it is. But that is what we're doing in the upcoming weeks. And like I said, we'll jump more into the whole season review next weekend, on the following podcast. This week we'll take a little bit of a season recap here, and just look at like the stuff that is easily accessible on the My Stats portal, and then take a look at the league in general and the ABA playoffs. And there's a lot of interesting notes in this year's playoffs, so we'll definitely jump into that. Take a look forward at the matchups upcoming and what is up on the schedule for the ABA. So let's jump over actually to the stats as far as what I have on my end here. This is going to be all the stats that were reported, all the games that were reported for the Hoosier State Instigators over on the My Stats portal. There are games missing, there are stats missing, and that's ultimately because we had not had the chance to get all the stats recorded and reported in time. So that is on us. But I will show what we do have, at least posted on the My Stats portal. Let's see if I get the right one here. All right, so got season 2 for your Hoosier State Instigators, and we got the stats portal over here. And like I said, we are missing some stats. So these are the unofficial stats, and they are not 100% accurate. But I will just want to point out some of the team leaders for this season. So as far as scoring leader goes, I believe that is going to go to Levante Nelson. Um, I don't. Again, I think we're missing maybe a couple of games, but I'm pretty sure it is going to be Tay that gets the scoring title for this season, and then Malcolm Martin, I do believe, is going to be second on that list. So shout out to both of those guys for leading the way on the boards there. Taking a look at rebounds, and again, a lot of these may not have gotten reported properly, but it does look like, as far as we have on here, looks like Chuck is going to be the rebound leader, at least at the moment, and until we get all the stats recorded. But it looks like he's got a pretty good lead there. Assists is going to be Dame, and I'm fairly certain when that one is going to hold once we do get everything tallied up properly. Steals, I think, is also going to be Dame on that end. And as far as that goes, that's what we've got on here. But I did want to look at just the games in general and show a year-to-year difference. So this is this past season for your Hoosier State Instigators. Again, these are the games that got reported and stats recorded over on the My Stats portal. So obviously we had that first matchup against the pros and got the win there. Started off the season on a lot better track than last year, and that is something, we're glad we were able to start off on a win streak. That got us the first time over 500, and that is an improvement. Go down the season here, then we had a 500 mark after the 4 games there. Matchup against the Pitbulls, I think, yeah, we had 2 back-to-back matchups there, split that series. Indiana Legends there, a team that we have been able to defeat in all of the matchups. But as we take a look here and scroll through the season, we finished the season with 7 wins on the record, and I believe that's actually going to be the same as last season, but we'll pull that up here in a second. I could be off, but I believe it is going to be 7 wins at the end of the mark there. So a little bit of a rough stretch to finish out the year. This minors game did not get recorded properly as far as the scoring goes, but that's the one we just showed in this past week's matchup as far as the broadcast. So that one was another loss for the Instigators. So that should not affect the win total. We'll add another loss though as far as the record goes when we do look at this last one. But some big first for the Instigators in this year's games. So we beat the Lions, an in-state rivalry, a team that I think a lot of us have kind of like looked to as the team to try to replicate some of the successes that they've had. And a 6-point win there, our only matchup against the Lions. And I think that was a big stepping stone, at least for us to build off of, knowing that we're able to compete against these top-ranked teams in the ABA. They were in the top 10 of the power rankings at the time in that matchup, so it did show that the Hoosier State Instigators, we are a top a top team. We have the ability to compete against just about anybody in the ABA. We matched up against the Fury a couple of times, the number one team in the power rankings throughout the whole season, and in that final power rankings, they were able to defeat us in both of those matchups, but it was a 10-point game in both of them. So still very close matchups there. We also had that win over the Aces, a 2-point win there. That was our first top 10 opponent we defeated. So a couple of firsts on the year. Overall, I think it was an improvement compared to last season. But that is, obviously something we keep track of. We'll have to start tracking how many top ranked teams, top 25 ranked teams, we're able to defeat year over year. But I definitely think this year we got our first wins over ranked teams, and our we got multiple wins over top 10 ranked teams. So it did show we are capable of doing that. We just had a rough stretch there to end the season, and obviously that's not the time you want to have that. And it rolled into the play-ins, and ultimately we fell in that play-in matchup. Compared to last season, though, and again, we'll go more in depth on it next weekend, but I just wanted to get a brief overview of a comparison side by side of the two seasons. Last season, we started off with a loss against the Rebels, then a win against the Saints. So we were at 500 after 2 games. We were not ever, though, at a point with a winning record. So that is another thing that we had for the first time this past season in season 2. Last season, though, we had the 500 record. Then we went on a bit of a rough stretch there with 3 losses, including a loss against the Lions. Then we played the Saints again, got our second win. Unfortunately, we did not get a chance to match up against the Saints this year, even though they are in our division now this year, being that we got moved to the Black division. But that is a team we did not get a chance to match up against. And, we were undefeated against them last season. I think it would have been a good matchup again this season. And that is a team that ultimately was ahead of us in the final standings because of the final records. So I think if we would have had a couple of games against them, that might have had a little bit more of an impact on the standings within the division. But hopefully that's a team we're able to match up against next season. Following that matchup there, we did go on couple game losing streak. Then that matchup against the Legends. Again, we have been able to defeat the Legends in all of the matchups we've had. There's a forfeit on there against the Aces, and I think that is another thing that may have not fallen our way this past season. Is we had a couple of games that got canceled, or we had a few games actually that got canceled, and we did not get forfeit victories in many of them. I think maybe only one we got awarded for, and the other ones just got canceled. Teams folded, so that obviously had an impact on that. Our matchups against the Blaze never happened, as well as the Monsters, and then I think another matchup against the Pitbulls possibly was on the docket, but none of those wound up happening. So there are a few games, at least, that got canceled from the initial schedule that we had. But I think we only had one that actually got awarded to us as a forfeit victory this past season. Then we went on the road there, or we went back home first season against the Lions. But you can see just in general, I think that's kind of the key. Even if we have a similar record, these matchups against the Lions, I think, are a big difference from year over year. You know, the Lions still last season and this season one of the top ranked teams in the ABA. They're consistently a top ranked team in the ABA. And for us to go from losing these games against the Lions, that one was a 20-point game. The other one last season an 8-point game, so a closer matchup there. But to have the victory over the Lions this year, I think that's where you can see a lot of the improvement as a whole from the team, and see where the Instigators have that growth, and you want to see them be a little bit more consistent. I think is the thing we kind of hit on in the past game broadcast is we're able to play with the very best of teams. It's just we are a little inconsistent when it comes to it, not only game to game but quarter to quarter. I think a lot of it did have to do with some of the fluidity within our roster situation this year. But ultimately, we are a very good team, and then one of the teams that can compete with anybody in the ABA. But we take a look here as we wrapped up the season. We had a couple of wins there last in the first season against the Legends and the Phoenix. Um, and we wrapped up our season regular season last year against the Lions with another loss. So we went 0-3 against the Lions in the first season, but this past season we did go 1-0 against the Lions. It was also we were able to defeat every Indiana-based team that we did match up against, both in the ABA and the IBL. So I think that's also a cool side note for this past season. And then we ultimately fell in the second play-in game. So our fate is the same as last year, where we did make it to the play-in tournament, but we ultimately fell in that last play-in game, just short of the playoffs. So hopefully we can jump to that next, the next level and jump into the playoffs next season. But that's what we're going for. So let's go and take a look at the ABA site here. So it's going to have the scores from the games this past week, and we'll discuss the games a little bit further and then take a look at the playoff matchups here. So this is, let me see, let me try refreshing that screen. It looks like it didn't take over properly. All right. Yep, it looks like it came over right now. So they got the power rankings here on the side, and these power rankings are the same power rankings we've shown the past few weeks. These are the final regular season power rankings. Believe they might put power rankings after everything, but I think this might just be the final power rankings in general for the ABA. But we take a look here at the playoff games from this past weekend. So it's going to be all right here on the side, and that is going to be the matchups there in order of the days, I do believe. So Saturday and then Sunday. And if you just skim through here, see some of the top teams. Buffalo Extreme with a win, handedly over the Originals. Obviously the Chicago Fury over the Wisconsin Frost, 151-118. So a decided victory in that matchup there. Austin Bats, an undefeated team. You can see right there, number 7 in the country with a win over the Purple Rain. That's a pretty cool team name. And the Lions with a win over the Legends. Some of these games from Saturday, as well as a Windy City Inferno victory over the Southland Saints. Again, that's another matchup in our division. And you take a look here at Mississippi Silverbacks with a win as well. They were the representatives from the South region last season, so a team you got to keep your eye on. I think Binghamton Bulldogs as well. Yep, Binghamton Bulldogs with a win over Sarasota as well. And that was the representative from the East last year. And we look, I think this is going to be where we start hitting the games for Sunday. So we've got the Austin Bats again. They were able to get another victory, move on into the next round of the playoffs, and still remain undefeated. Not too many undefeated teams left in the ABA. I think it's just going to be the Fury Panthers and the Bats at this point. But we take a look, another team that we matched up against throughout the season, the Columbus Wizards. They fell against the Steel City Yellow Jackets, and that was a pretty big loss there, 136-103. That was one of the more, I guess, surprising possibly matchups. Or outcomes of the matchups from the playoffs that I saw from this past week. At least that margin there, the 33 points is a lot. Wizards were a very solid team when we matched up against them, and they were able to defeat us in all the matchups that we had. But they also matched up very well against some of the other top teams that they faced off against, including the Indiana Lions. So a little bit of a surprise on my end there. Another one here, the Mississippi Silverbacks. They were on a hot streak to end the season, but they did fall to the Gulf Coast Gladiators, so they will not be repeating their way back to the Final Four this year. Atlanta Aliens, always a top-ranked team over the past few seasons. They got a win there to move on. And here are where things get interesting. So Buffalo Extreme over the Binghamton Bulldogs with a 1-point win there, 99-98, with a note that says under protest. So in the ABA, you can protest these games and the outcomes of these games for various reasons, whether it's because of scoring discrepancies or I mean, typically that's ultimately what it comes down to is scoring discrepancies and what would happen then is the ABA reviews these games, and if they ultimately determine there is an error or a discrepancy that should be fixed, they can make the ruling for the teams to ultimately resolve that. So this matchup there, I believe they did wind up eventually. I don't know if they ruled in favor of the extreme or if they wound up having to do anything further, but I do know the extreme did wind up moving on. So that is the actual final is the extreme over the Bulldogs there, and that is what ultimately wound up happening. The extreme move on over the Bulldogs. So again, last season, Bulldogs and the Extreme, both two of the top teams in the East. But the Bulldogs ultimately came away with the victory in the matchup, moving them into the final as the final representative for the Eastern region after a few more matchups, but they were able to win their division last year over the Extreme. This year, though, it goes the opposite way in a close matchup. But again, that's the first of the under protest matchups there. We see the Chicago Fury with another victory there, remain undefeated, move on into the next round of playoffs with a 119-105 victory over the Windy City Inferno. And again, that's going to crown the Fury as the division champions for the Central Region Black Division. And then this last one here is very interesting. So the Indiana Lions and the Nashville Aces, that game is under protest. Now, this one, I don't know exactly what is going to happen. From my understanding of the situation, the game did get protested, and it was decided that they would have to play the final 10 seconds of this matchup. Um, I don't really know when or when that's happening, but it should, in theory, be settled by tomorrow because they are supposed to be playing in a matchup. So I don't really know. Again, it's an interesting one. I'm still waiting to see if either of these teams post anything in regards to it. I know there was a little bit of a teaser from the Aces as far as that they weren't done quite yet, and that's what it would be in reference to. Is that there is that protest, and then ultimately they are going to have to play, I guess, the last 10 seconds or so of that matchup. If you caught the game live or you caught the rebroadcast of it, or not rebroadcast, but the posted stream of the game, Minotaur Streaming did an amazing job calling that game. But there were a couple of interesting, I guess is the best way to put it, calls as far as fouls go in that matchup. So rather than saying one way or the other, I'll let you guys make that decision as far as how you feel on the foul calls. I will just say they were interesting, as far as the calls down the line. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole game, but I did rewatch the last few minutes of it. So can't comment throughout the whole game, but just on the few minutes that I did watch of that. And the other thing is, and it's something that we, the Instigators, experienced this season. I think the league in general, we need to know the rules a little bit better. And this isn't to call anybody out in particular. It's just saying in general, I think us, um, teams in general need to know the rules a little bit better. Um, Unless there's a different rule for playoffs, and I could be mistaken. And again, this would fall under the same thing, but I think everybody needs to be on the same page as far as overtime rules. So that game wound up going into overtime. To my understanding, and again, if I'm wrong, then it's still same point applies. Everybody needs to know the rules and be on the same page when it comes to that. But I do believe overtime rules is 3:10 and out. That's my understanding. So that would mean 3 minutes is the first overtime period. If the game is tied at the end of regulation, then it goes to 3 minute overtime period. If the game is still tied after that, then it goes to an elam ending. Next to 10 points wins. That is my understanding of the overtime rules. Now, this matchup, as well as our matchup that went into overtime this year, both wound up playing an overtime period of 5 minutes. Again, I don't believe that is the correct way to do the overtime rules according to the ABA. I believe the 3:10 and out rule is the proper way for the overtime rules. Again, 3 minute overtime period. If they're still tied, then you go to the 10-point elam ending. I believe that is how the playoffs, or I believe that is both regular season and playoffs, unless I'm mistaken and there is a different rule for playoffs. But I believe that is the official overtime rules. And like I said, we had that mistake on our end too. So it's not saying that it's just that game, but I think in the league as a general whole, we need to all be on the same page as far as that. And even like this past game stream that we just did against the Miners, free throws. We didn't even get the free throws properly because of the foul count. After what is it, eight fouls, then you go to the free throw line. We were not going to the line, I think, until 10 or 11. Again, it's just something I feel like everybody needs to get a little bit better and more knowledgeable and on the same page when it comes to that. Teams, refs, everybody involved, and ultimately, I think that's one of the things that the ABA does struggle with. But like I said, we'll jump more into the things that went right, things that went wrong, more so next week. But I do think in general that is something that the league needs to be a little bit better at to get themselves to continue to grow and to continue to become more legitimized and on that same level as other professional leagues, and to earn that respect. Obviously, you're not going to see those type of errors. At least you shouldn't be seeing those type of errors. And if you do, they really should not be happening at the top levels of any professional sport, whether that's the NBA or any other sport. But if you were to watch an NBA game and one team's playing a different overtime than another matchup, you'd be a little bit um, you raise your eyebrows at that. So it's things like that, and then obviously free throws, if free throws weren't awarded properly, and stuff of that nature. That's just something I think that the league in general, we need to, all sides of it, we need to improve upon. Um, just so everybody's on the same page, everybody's aware of these rules and how things do need to shake out when it comes to these situations. Obviously, these aren't overtime games is not something you come into a lot of times, but when you do go into those situations, I feel like we need to be more prepared in that. Um, Regardless, though, I guess they're having a replay of the last 10 seconds of that matchup. So I think it should be tied going into the last 10, and then the Lions get the ball. Don't 100% know, but that's my understanding of the situation. Makes it very, very interesting because, um, as far as I know, they have not played that game or played that final 10 seconds again. But I'm sure they'll post something about it here. And if not, then that matchup, I believe they got this weekend coming up. I think it's supposed to be tomorrow. If not, then it's Sunday. Regardless, though, believe it is. I believe it is tomorrow. Actually, they should have a matchup. So that's going to be very, very short notice for whichever team that is moving on. Obviously, that's going to be short notice as well for the other team that they're going to be facing. So makes it a little bit complicated on other ends too. That maybe it shouldn't be as complicated as it is. But that is one of the things you face with just being a member of the ABA. But it is a good thing. I do think that you can protest the games. Obviously, I think the resolution needs to be a little bit quicker in these type of situations. Obviously, regular season, I think you can push it a little bit further. But in playoffs, it does something that needs to get resolved a little bit faster. But let's pull up the bracket for the central region. These are going to be the playoffs for our region here. Take that off the screen, put this one up. So in the central region, will be hosted by the Chicago Fury. We've got matchups this weekend. And it looks like the games are going to be on Sunday. So Sunday, it looks like those games are going to be. That first matchup is going to be the Fury against the Yellow Jackets. Yellow Jackets winning the Blue Division over the Columbus Wizards. Then we've got that's going to be at 3 p.m. And I'm not sure if those games are going to be streamed live or not. But I do hope they are. If they are, I will definitely try to catch them. But that would be the first matchup. Chicago Fury, obviously the number one team. They're going to be the favorite in any of these matchups. And they are the representative from our division, the Black Division. Let me just pull up the divisions here on the other screen. Red Division is going to be between the Lions and Aces. And yeah, so always great to see you, Night J, right over on Twitch. It is an interesting situation, and again, I'm explaining it to the best of my knowledge. I don't know exactly when that's getting resolved, but it does need to get resolved here very soon because they do have a matchup. It looks like on Sunday at 5:30 p.m. So whoever ultimately comes away with the win in that matchup is going to take on the 402 Elite. 402 Elite is the winner, I'm guessing, of the white division. Trying to see if I can pull that up on my. Yeah, I guess it would have to be the white division. That's the only other division in the central region. For some reason it does not show them though on the division standings on the My Stats portal. But I also don't see the Steel City Yellow Jackets over on the blue. Oh, I've got the wrong season up. That would make more sense. So yeah, I believe they are going to be the yeah. So it is going to be the Central White Division for the 402 Elite. It looks like they had an 11-3 record on the season, and the Yellow Jackets, it shows at 6-5 for the regular season. So those are the other two teams there that will be in those matchups. Teams that we aren't quite as familiar with. We've had matchups against the Fury, obviously being in our division a couple of times, and then we've had matchups against both the Aces and the Lions. So regardless of who moves on in that red division, we have victories actually over both of those teams in the red division. So I think again the Fury are going to be the favorite regardless of whatever the scenario winds up being the number one seed and the number one team throughout the power rankings. Um, but it also shows that we have the ability, like I said earlier, to compete against these top teams, and we've beaten two of these teams that are potentially top four teams in the division. So I think it's not a matter of if the instigators can get themselves into these type of situations, but when. I think we just need to materialize it, and consistency is going to be the key for that. But there'll be some fun matchups there. I'm looking forward to these games. Again, I'm hoping they put something up here soon, or they at least announce when they're doing that for the Lions and the Aces. Um, but that's just an interesting situation, and one that, in my opinion, I wish got resolved a little bit faster here, because it's not giving these teams much time to prepare. But maybe that is I guess a benefit for them as well. That you don't know who you're going into that matchup against, but both of those teams would know who they are playing against. But regardless, that's the games for our region, the Central Region Championship. And it looks like those games are going to be on. Oh no, 15 is Saturday. I don't know why I said Sunday. 15th is Saturday, so that's tomorrow. So yeah, that needs to be resolved by then. So that needs to be resolved really quick, and I can't imagine they would travel all the way there if they don't have that resolved. Yeah, interesting situation there. So I believe if those games are Saturday, then the winners of each respective game then would face against each other on Sunday, um, unless we're going to push it to another week. But I think that is what we're going to do. That way, it would give the representatives from our region 2 weeks of rest going into the championship weekend. But that is the central region, and I think I did get a screen cap. And yeah, so there's a screen cap. This was actually shared by Jay Wright over on our Discord. And this is a really nice breakdown from the 402 Elite of the remaining teams. And it breaks it down into the regions, the power ranking, or the regions and the rankings within, and the teams that would be advancing in the matchups. So we got our region there at the top, the Central Region. As we just went over, the Chicago Fury playing the Yellow Jackets in that 1-4 matchup. Regardless of who advances, I guess the Lions and the Aces, they're going to be the number 2 seed technically, and they play against the 402 Elite. So again, winners of those respective matchups then go on into the Final Four. And then we take a look over in the East, Buffalo Extreme at the top there. Again, another team. I think they're one of the best teams in the ABA. I think if I had to pencil a top seed in the East, that is who I would go with as well. But that is the 1 seed there going against the Wyoming Valley Clutch for the 4 seed. Then we got the matchup against the Jersey Express and New England Lightning. Winner of those respective matchups then would face off against each other for rights for the Eastern region. In the South, it'll be a big matchup there between the undefeated Bats as they take on consistently top-ranked Atlanta Aliens. Then we've got the Gladiators against the Lambs, and winners again of those respective games go on again and challenge each other for the Final Four spot. Over out west, Silicon Valley Panthers looking to remain undefeated, taking on the Wolfpack. Then we got the Legends against the Buckets, and if I had to make some predictions here, I would say you would going with the one seeds might be a pretty good guess, and if I had to go with that, I do think the Fury are going to be the top team over in our region, in the Central region. They just have been very dominant and very consistent. It's been almost what 2 years now since they've lost, something crazy like that. So I would have to say they're going to be the favorite, and obviously they're the defending champions. Out in the East, I know I said that I like that Buffalo Extreme team. I think they're going to be my favorite there. And if they're able to advance, I think they are a team that could very well challenge the Chicago Fury in a matchup. In the South, I think South is maybe the one that is the toss-up. If I had to say, Austin Bats are still undefeated though, so until they lose a game, I would say they'd have to be the favorite. The Aliens, though, I know are a consistently top-ranked team. And then obviously strong seasons for both the Gladiators and the Lambs. So that one I think is the one that I could see maybe being a toss up. But I'd say you'd have to go with the Bats if I had to pick one because they're still undefeated. Then over in the West, Silicon Valley Panthers, they're undefeated as well, looking to repeat their Final Four run from last season. So that would be my intuition as far as where I think things are going to go. I'd probably have to say the one seeds in all the regions is what I would expect. Although if I had to pick one upset, I'd say maybe the Aliens get their way into that. But that is the playoffs, and that is the regional championships we've got going on this weekend. So we got regional, top four teams from each region, winner of each division within the regions, all going up against each other this weekend. Believe at least this weekend across the ABA. And then we've got a couple more weekends until we hit the playoff championship weekend. And that's going to be in St. Louis the very first weekend in April. But that's what you got coming up. I'm sure we'll have some, not us specifically, but there will be some game streams of these matchups. I think the Buffalo Extreme do normally broadcast their games. And a lot of these other teams do wind up broadcasting games as well. I'm sure if you follow them over on socials, you'll be able to find some of these matchups. But that is playoffs, what we got coming up this weekend and for the next few weeks in the ABA. Just less than a month now left in the full season and playoffs. But that's what we got. And next week, again, we'll be jumping into more of a debrief of the season, things that went right, things that could improve, go in more detail about what you'll have votes on as far as evaluations and such. Some more fan votes coming up here over the off season. Again, that's exclusive for our fan voter or tier higher, fan voter tier or higher on the Patreon, Apex Athletic Collective. But until then, enjoy the games this weekend. And I think that is going to be it for tonight's episode. But as always, until next time, be great and instigate.